The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of eastern Afghanistan as Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hawk Rodriguez adjusted his rifle scope for the third time. His team of 6 Navy SEALs had been moving through the mountains for 18 hours, tracking a high-value target who had been coordinating attacks on NATO supply convoys. The intelligence was solid, the mission parameters clear, but something felt wrong. Romeo 6, this is Alpha Team. We have eyes on the compound, Rodriguez whispered into his radio as he studied the mud brick buildings below through his binoculars. The target location sat in a natural bowl surrounded by steep hillsides, with only one obvious approach route. It looked too easy. Petty Officer Jake Tornado Chen crouched beside him, scanning their 6 o'clock position. Chief, I count maybe 4 tangos moving around the main building, but the thermal readings are showing a lot more heat signatures scattered throughout the area. Rodriguez frowned. Their pre-mission briefing had indicated minimal resistance, maybe 8 to 10 hostiles at most. The thermal imaging was painting a different picture entirely. He could see at least 20 distinct heat signatures, and those were just the ones not concealed by the thick walls of the compound buildings. Delta, what's your read on the perimeter? Rodriguez asked through his comm system. Petty Officer First Class Sarah Viper Martinez, positioned 300 meters to their east, responded immediately. Chief, I've got movement in the rocks about 400 meters south of your position. Looks like they're setting up overwatch positions. This whole thing smells like a setup. Rodriguez felt his gut clench. In 12 years of special operations, he had learned to trust that feeling. But their mission orders were explicit, and the target they were tracking had information that could save American lives. Sometimes, you had to walk into the trap to spring it. The team leader made his decision. All right. Listen up. We proceed as planned, but we're going to assume this is a deliberate ambush. Viper, I want you to pull back to the ridgeline and provide overwatch. If this goes sideways, we're going to need someone with a clear field of fire. Copy that, Chief. Moving to position now. Rodriguez watched through his scope as Martinez began her careful withdrawal to higher ground. The woman was one of the finest snipers he had ever worked with, equally deadly with a rifle as any operator he had served alongside. Her presence on the team had raised eyebrows initially, but after 3 deployments together, nobody questioned her abilities. The remaining 5 SEALs began their descent toward the target compound. Rodriguez took point, followed by Chen, then Petty Officer Second Class David Bulldog Thompson, Hospital Corpsman Second Class Miguel Doc Ramirez, and finally Petty Officer Second Class Anthony Wrench Kowalski, bringing up the rear. The approach took 40 minutes of careful movement through loose scree and around boulder formations that could hide enemy positions. Every shadow seemed to hold potential threats. Every sound carried the possibility of discovery. The team moved with practiced silence, communicating through hand signals and maintaining tactical spacing. When they reached the compound's outer perimeter, Rodriguez called a halt. The main building sat 200 meters ahead, with several smaller structures scattered around it. A few goats wandered the area, and he could see clothes hanging on lines between some of the buildings. It looked like a normal village, except for the absence of women and children. Romeo 6, Alpha Team is in position for final approach, Rodriguez reported to their command element. Copy, Alpha Team. You are cleared to proceed. Be advised, drone overhead shows increased activity in your area over the past 30 minutes. Rodriguez acknowledged the transmission and signaled his team forward. They had covered less than 50 meters when Chen suddenly raised his fist, freezing the entire team in place. Multiple contacts, Chen whispered urgently. I count at least 15 moving to flanking positions. We've got company coming from 3 sides. Through his scope, Rodriguez could see armed figures emerging from concealment among the rocks and buildings. These weren't the handful of barely trained fighters they had expected. The movements were coordinated, disciplined. These men had military training. Viper, do you have eyes on our situation? Rodriguez asked. Martinez's voice came back tense, but controlled. Chief, you've got problems. I count 40+ hostiles moving to surround your position. They've been waiting for you. This is definitely a trap. Rodriguez felt his blood run cold. 40 against 5, in terrain that heavily favored the defenders. The mathematics of the situation were not encouraging. But retreat was no longer an option. The enemy had already cut off their primary withdrawal route. All positions, prepare for contact. We're going to have to fight our way out of this one. The first shots rang out before Rodriguez finished speaking. Muzzle flashes erupted from multiple positions around the compound as the hidden fighters opened fire. The SEALs immediately took cover behind the nearest available protection, returning fire while assessing their tactical situation. "Doc, get on the radio and call in immediate air support," Rodriguez shouted over the increasing volume of gunfire. "Tell them we need everything they can send." "When come Saturday?" Ramirez was already on his radio, but the response was not what they wanted to hear. "Chief, closest air support is 30 minutes out. Weather front moving in from the west is grounding everything closer." A burst of automatic weapon fire chewed up the rock inches from Rodriguez's head, sending stone fragments flying. He could hear the distinctive crack of AK-47 rounds passing overhead, mixed with the heavier thump of machine gun fire from multiple positions. Chen had found cover behind a low wall and was engaging targets to their north. "Chief, they've got us bracketed pretty good. We need to find better cover, or we're going to get chewed up out here." Thompson was laying down suppressive fire with his SAW light machine gun, trying to keep the enemy from advancing on their position. The big man's weapon chattered in controlled bursts, sending streams of tracers toward the muzzle flashes in the rocks above them. "Wrench, can you get us some breathing room with that 203? Rodriguez called to Kowalski, who was already loading a 40mm grenade into the launcher mounted under his rifle. "On it, Chief." Kowalski aimed carefully and sent a high-explosive round into a cluster of rocks where several enemy fighters had taken position. The explosion sent debris flying and temporarily silenced the guns from that position. But for every position they suppressed, two more seemed to open fire. The enemy had planned this ambush carefully, with overlapping fields of fire and multiple fallback positions. Rodriguez realized they were facing a much more sophisticated opponent than intelligence had indicated. "Viper, I need you to start picking off their shooters," Rodriguez called to Martinez. "Focus on anyone with crew-served weapons or anyone directing their movement." "Already on it, Chief. I can see their command element about 600 meters to your northwest." Taking the shot, through the chaos of the firefight, Rodriguez heard the distinctive crack of Martinez's .300 Winchester Magnum rifle. A few seconds later, she reported back, "Target down." That was their spotter for the mortar team. "But Chief, I'm seeing more movement coming up the valley from the south. Looks like reinforcements." Rodriguez felt the situation slipping away from them. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and now potentially facing even more enemies. The rocky terrain that had seemed like it would provide concealment for their approach was now working against them, giving their attackers multiple positions of advantage. A rocket-propelled grenade suddenly streaked past their position, exploding against the hillside behind them. The pressure wave from the blast was disorienting, and Rodriguez felt debris pelting his back. "They've got RPGs now," Thompson shouted. "We can't stay here much longer." Rodriguez made a quick tactical assessment. Their current position was becoming untenable, but moving would expose them to fire from multiple directions. They needed to find a way to break contact and withdraw to a more defensible position. "Doc, what's the status on that air support?" "Still 25 minutes out, Chief, but I've got artillery standing by if we can get a good read on their positions." "Negative on artillery. Too close to our position and we don't know if there are civilians in those buildings." Another RPG round exploded nearby, this one close enough to shower them with dirt and rock fragments. Rodriguez could taste dust and cordite in the air as he tried to spot the launcher position. "Viper, can you see where those RPGs are coming from?" "Negative, Chief. They're firing from defiled positions. But I can see more fighters moving into position on the high ground to your east. Looks like they're trying to get above you." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Rodriguez knew they had maybe minutes before the enemy completed their encirclement. Once that happened, the SEALs would be fighting from an impossible position with no hope of extraction. Chen suddenly called out urgently, "Chief, we've got movement in the compound. Looks like someone's coming out with a white flag." Rodriguez risked a look toward the main building, and saw a figure emerging with what appeared to be a piece of white cloth. The man was walking slowly toward their position with his hands visible. "Hold fire! Hold fire!" Rodriguez commanded. "Let's see what this is about." The shooting gradually died down as both sides recognized the attempt at communication. The man with the white flag continued approaching until he was within shouting distance. "American soldiers," the man called in, accented but clear English. "You are surrounded. We do not wish to kill you, but you will surrender your weapons and come with us." Rodriguez exchanged glances with his team members. Surrender was not an option for a Navy SEAL, but he needed to buy time while they figured out their next move. "What do you want?" Rodriguez shouted back. "You have come for Hakim al-Masri, yes? He is not here. But you will serve our purposes just as well. American Special Forces prisoners will bring a good price." The man's words confirmed Rodriguez's worst fears. This had been a deliberate trap, using false intelligence to lure in a special operations team. The real target was not in the compound, and probably never had been. "Think about it, American," the man continued. "You are outnumbered and surrounded. Your support is too far away. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the laws of war." Rodriguez knew better than to trust such promises from fighters who had just tried to kill them with rockets. He also knew that captured special operations personnel faced interrogation, torture, and eventual execution. Surrender was not an option. "Viper, I need options," he whispered into his radio. "Chief, I'm seeing more movement from the south. Estimate another 15 to 20 fighters moving up the valley. They'll be in position to cut off any withdrawal route within the next 10 minutes. The net was closing around them." Rodriguez made his decision. "Tell your commander we need 5 minutes to discuss terms." Rodriguez called to the man with the flag. "You have 3 minutes, no more." As the man withdrew toward the compound, Rodriguez quickly gathered his team around him. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. The enemy was offering them 3 minutes to surrender, but Rodriguez intended to use that time to figure out how 5 Navy SEALs were going to fight their way through 40 hostile fighters and live to tell about it. The clock was ticking, and their options were running out fast. Rodriguez huddled with his team behind the inadequate cover of scattered rocks and a low stone wall. The 3 minutes they had negotiated was already down to 2.5, and the enemy fighters were using the ceasefire to improve their positions. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," Rodriguez whispered urgently. "We can't go back the way we came, and we can't stay here. Our only chance is to break through their weakest point and try to reach that ridgeline to the east where Viper can provide better support." Chen studied the terrain through his rifle scope. "Chief, that means crossing about 400 meters of open ground under fire from elevated positions. That's suicide. Everything's suicide right now." Thompson growled, checking his ammunition. "Question is which option gets us killed the slowest." Doc Ramirez was monitoring radio traffic, hoping for better news about air support. "Still, 18 minutes out on the birds, Chief. Artillery is still standing by, but they need us clear of the target area by at least 300 meters. Rodriguez did quick calculations in his head. 300 meters through hostile territory while being shot at by 40 fighters was not encouraging mathematics. But staying put meant certain death or capture. "Wrench, how much demo do you have left?" Kowalski patted his pack. 4 frags, 2 smokes, and about 6 pounds of C4 with timers. Plus whatever's in my 203. "Doc, medical supplies?" "Full kit, Chief. But if we take casualties while moving across that open ground, it's going to be tough to treat anyone." The sound of voices speaking in what Rodriguez recognized as Pashto drifted across from the enemy positions. They were coordinating something. Probably final positioning before resuming their attack. "Time's up," Rodriguez decided. "Here's the plan. Wrench and Thompson provide covering fire from here for 30 seconds while the rest of us move to that cluster of rocks about 50 meters toward the ridge. Once we're in position, you two follow while we cover. Viper, I need you to start picking off anyone who looks like leadership or anyone manning heavy weapons." "Copy that, Chief." "I can see what looks like a mortar crew setting up about 700 meters to your north." "Taking them first," Rodriguez was about to give the signal to move when the distinctive crack of Martinez's rifle echoed across the valley. Almost immediately, he heard shouting from the enemy positions as the mortar crew was eliminated. "That's our cue. Move, move, move." The remaining ceasefire evaporated as the SEALs broke from cover. Rodriguez led Chen and Ramirez in a sprint toward the rocky outcrop, while Thompson and Kowalski laid down suppressive fire. The air around them immediately filled with the buzz and crack of incoming rounds as the enemy fighters opened up from multiple positions. Rodriguez felt a bullet tug at his sleeve as he dove behind the rocks, followed seconds later by Chen and Ramirez. The position was marginally better, with more solid cover and a slightly better view of the terrain they needed to cross. "Thompson, Kowalski, move now!" Rodriguez shouted, while he and Chen returned fire toward the nearest enemy positions. The two SEALs broke cover and began their sprint, but they had only covered 20 meters when an enemy fighter with an RPG appeared on the ridgeline above them. Rodriguez saw the man shouldering the weapon and knew Thompson and Kowalski were in the open with nowhere to go. Martinez's rifle cracked again from her overwatch position, and the RPG gunner tumbled backward off the rocks. But more enemy fighters were appearing, and the volume of fire was increasing dramatically. Thompson stumbled as he ran, and Rodriguez saw blood on the big man's leg. But he kept moving. Kowalski reached the rocks first and immediately began returning fire while Thompson dove behind cover, favoring his wounded leg. "Doc, Thompson's hit," Rodriguez called. Ramirez was already moving toward the wounded SEAL with his medical kit. "How bad, Bulldog?" "Through and through in the thigh." Thompson gritted through clenched teeth. "Missed the bone. I can still move. Pressure bandage and keep going," Ramirez said quickly, applying field dressing to the wound. "You'll live, but we need to get you to proper medical care soon." Rodriguez assessed their new position. They had maybe 150 meters of open ground before reaching another cluster of rocks that would put them within supporting distance of Martinez's position. But crossing that ground would be even more dangerous than their last movement. "Viper, status report." "Chief, I count 36 remaining hostiles in various positions. I've taken down 4 so far, but they're getting smart about staying under cover. The good news is, I can see your next waypoint, and I can provide covering fire for most of your movement. What about those reinforcements from the south? They're in position now. You've got fighters on 3 sides, but the eastern approach to the ridge is still relatively clear. That's your best bet." Rodriguez studied the terrain ahead. Martinez was right. It was their only real option. But it would require perfect timing and a lot of luck. "All right, people. Same drill, but this time we're all moving together. Wrench, I want you to drop smoke about halfway across that open area. Thompson, can you move on that leg? Just try to keep up with me, Chief." Rodriguez was about to give the movement order when Chen suddenly grabbed his arm. "Chief, look at that." Following Chen's pointing finger, Rodriguez saw something that made his blood run cold. A technical vehicle, a pickup truck with a heavy machine gun mounted in the bed, was moving up the valley road toward their position. The .50 caliber machine gun could cut through their cover like paper. "Viper, do you see that technical?" "Got it, Chief. But it's at the extreme range for my rifle. I might be able to disable it, but it would take multiple shots, and I'd have to expose my position." Rodriguez weighed the options quickly. If that heavy machine gun got into position, it would make their movement impossible. But if Martinez exposed her position trying to stop it, they would lose their only source of supporting fire. The decision was made for him when the technical stopped about 600 meters away, and the machine gunner began traversing his weapon toward their position. The first burst of .50 caliber rounds shattered the rocks above their heads, sending deadly fragments flying. "Everyone down!" Rodriguez shouted, as the heavy rounds chewed up their cover position. The .50 caliber was devastating in its effect. Rocks that had provided solid protection against rifle fire were being pulverized by the heavy machine gun. Rodriguez knew they had maybe seconds before their position became completely untenable. "Wrench, can you reach that technical with your 203? Kowalski studied the distance and shook his head. "Too far, Chief. Maximum effective range is about 400 meters for the grenade launcher." Another burst from the .50 caliber forced them to press themselves against the rocks as fragments flew overhead. Rodriguez could hear the enemy fighters shouting to each other, coordinating an assault while the machine gun kept the SEALs pinned down. "Viper, you have to take that technical out. We can't move with that thing operational." "Roger, Chief. Stand by." Rodriguez heard Martinez's rifle crack 3 times in rapid succession. The heavy machine gun fell silent, but he could see figures moving around the vehicle, trying to get the weapon back into action. "Vehicle disabled, Chief. Machine gunner is down, but they're trying to get someone else on the gun." "How's your position up there?" "Compromised. I'm taking fire from multiple positions now. They've spotted my muzzle flashes." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Martinez was now fighting for her own survival while trying to provide support. Thompson was wounded and losing blood, and the enemy was preparing for a final assault on their position. Rodriguez made a desperate decision. "Doc? Thompson, you two are going to have to hold this position and provide covering fire. Chen, Kowalski, and I are going to make a break for the ridge and try to link up with Viper." "Chief, you can't leave wounded behind," Ramirez protested. "We're not leaving anyone behind. We're going to get to Viper's position and then provide covering fire while you two follow. But somebody has to go first, and Thompson can't make that run with his leg." Thompson checked his ammunition and adjusted his position behind the rocks. "Don't worry about me, Chief. I didn't join the Navy to live forever. Just make sure you come back for us." Rodriguez felt the weight of command pressing down on him. Every option involved splitting the team and risking lives. But staying together meant they would all die in this rocky outcrop. "Wrench, lay down smoke in 30 seconds. Chen, you go first, then me, then Kowalski. We move fast, and we don't stop for anything." Kowalski loaded a smoke grenade into his launcher and waited for Rodriguez's signal. The enemy fire had slackened slightly as the fighters repositioned for their assault. But Rodriguez could hear vehicles moving and men shouting orders. "Smoke out." The grenade burst in the middle of the open area, creating a gray-white cloud that would provide concealment for part of their movement. Rodriguez knew they would have maybe 2 minutes before the wind dispersed it. "Go, go, go!" Chen sprinted from cover into the smoke cloud, quickly disappearing into the gray haze. Rodriguez counted to 5 and followed. With Kowalski right behind him, the sound of gunfire erupted again as the enemy fighters spotted movement in the smoke. Rodriguez ran harder than he had ever run in his life, weaving through the rocks while bullets cracked past his head. He could see Chen ahead of him, almost clear of the smoke, and within 100 meters of the ridge where Martinez was positioned. Then, disaster struck. Chen suddenly stumbled and fell, crying out as he hit the ground. Rodriguez saw blood spreading across the back of the younger SEAL's uniform as he tried to crawl forward. "Chen's hit!" Rodriguez shouted into his radio while changing direction to reach the wounded man. Kowalski was right beside him as they reached Chen, who was conscious but obviously in serious pain. Blood was flowing from a wound in his lower back, and his legs weren't responding properly. "Spinal hit," Kowalski said grimly. "We need to get him out of here now." Rodriguez looked back toward the position where Thompson and Ramirez were still fighting, then ahead toward the ridge where Martinez was providing covering fire. They were trapped in the middle with a seriously wounded team member and enemy fighters closing in from 3 sides. The smoke was beginning to clear, and Rodriguez could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions as the enemy fighters prepared for their final assault. Chen was trying to say something, but blood was coming from his mouth now. "Leave me," Chen whispered. "Get to the ridge and call in that artillery." Rodriguez looked into the young SEAL's eyes and saw the same determination that had carried them through 3 deployments together. But leaving wounded behind went against everything Rodriguez believed in. "Nobody gets left behind," Rodriguez said firmly, grabbing Chen under the arms while Kowalski took his legs. As they began moving toward the ridge with their wounded teammate, the enemy fighters emerged from cover and began their final assault. The mathematics of survival had just gotten even worse, and Rodriguez wondered if any of them would live to see another sunset. Rodriguez and Kowalski struggled up the rocky slope, carrying Chen between them, while bullets cracked overhead and ricocheted off the stones around their feet. Each step was agony, not just from the physical strain of carrying their wounded teammate, but from knowing that Thompson and Ramirez were still trapped in the lower position, fighting against overwhelming odds. "Viper, we need covering fire on our 6. Rodriguez gasped into his radio as he stumbled over loose rocks. Martinez's rifle cracked repeatedly from somewhere above them, and Rodriguez could hear the distinctive sound of return fire as enemy fighters tried to silence the sniper. Her voice came back strained but controlled. "Chief, I count at least 20 hostiles moving up the slope behind you. I'm doing what I can, but they're using good fire and movement tactics. These guys have training." Rodriguez could hear the firefight continuing from Thompson and Ramirez's position below, but the volume of fire was decreasing. Either they were running low on ammunition, or the situation was getting worse. He tried not to think about which option was more likely. Chen was conscious, but fading fast. Blood continued to seep through the field dressing Kowalski had applied, and his breathing was becoming labored. The young SEAL was trying to say something, but the words were getting harder to understand. "Save your strength," Rodriguez told him as they crested a small ridge. "We're almost to Viper's position." Above them, Rodriguez could see muzzle flashes from Martinez's rifle as she engaged targets across the valley. Her position was well concealed among the rocks, but the enemy fighters were getting closer to figuring out her exact location. "There." Kowalski pointed toward a cluster of large boulders about 50 meters ahead, where Martinez had established her sniper hide. "I can see her position." "I can see her position." They covered the remaining distance in a desperate sprint, half carrying and half dragging Chen between them. Martinez had prepared a small defensive position behind the rocks, with good fields of view down into the valley and back toward their original route. "How is he?" Martinez asked as they laid Chen down behind the largest boulder. Rodriguez checked Chen's pulse and breathing. Both were weak but steady. The back wound was serious, possibly affecting his spine. But he was alive. In a full medical facility, Chen would probably survive. Out here in the mountains of Afghanistan, his chances were not as good. "He needs a medevac helicopter, and he needs it now," Rodriguez said grimly. "Chief," Martinez pointed down the slope toward their previous position. "Look." Rodriguez followed her pointing finger and saw enemy fighters overrunning the position where Thompson and Ramirez had been fighting. There was no sign of the two SEALs, and the shooting from that direction had stopped. "Bulldog, Doc, report," Rodriguez called urgently into his radio. Silence. "Bulldog Doc, do you copy?" Still nothing. Rodriguez felt his heart sink as he realized what the silence probably meant. In the space of 30 minutes, his 6-man team had been reduced to 3 effectives and 1 critically wounded. The mathematics of survival had just gotten much worse. "Chief, we've got movement coming up the main approach," Martinez reported, tracking targets through her rifle scope. "At least 15 fighters, and they know where we are now." Rodriguez assessed their position quickly. They had good cover, and Martinez had excellent fields of fire, but they were trapped on the ridge with no easy withdrawal route. Chen needed medical attention that they couldn't provide. And help was still 15 minutes away. "What's our ammunition status?" Rodriguez asked. Kowalski checked his gear. "I've got maybe 6 magazines left for the rifle, plus 2 grenades and some demo charges." 4 magazines, Martinez reported. "But I've only got about 15 rounds left for the sniper rifle." Rodriguez counted his own ammunition. Not enough for a sustained firefight against 15 or 20 attackers. They needed to change the dynamics of the situation somehow. "Wrench, how much C4 did you say you had?" "About 6 pounds with timers." "Why?" Rodriguez studied the terrain below their position. The enemy fighters were advancing up the slope in a loose skirmish line, using the rocks for cover as they moved. They were good, but they were also bunching up in certain areas where the terrain channeled their movement. "I've got an idea, but it's going to require perfect timing." Rodriguez explained his plan quickly while Martinez continued to engage targets moving up the slope. The idea was desperate and risky. But their current situation was already desperate. "Chief, that's crazy enough that it might actually work," Kowalski said when Rodriguez finished explaining. "Viper, how long can you keep those guys pinned down?" Martinez fired twice in quick succession, and 2 of the advancing fighters dropped behind cover. "Maybe 5 minutes if I'm lucky. But once they get within 200 meters, they're going to be able to rush our position. That'll have to be enough time. Wrench, get moving." Kowalski grabbed his demo kit and began working his way down the reverse slope of the ridge, staying out of sight of the advancing enemy fighters. His job was to work around to their flank and place charges along their most likely advance route. Rodriguez stayed with Martinez and Chen, helping to spot targets and trying to raise Thompson and Ramirez on the radio. He was beginning to accept that his two team members were either dead or captured, but he had to keep trying. "Doc, Bulldog, if you can hear this, we're on the ridge approximately 400 meters northeast of your last position. If you're able to move, try to work your way toward us." Martinez was firing methodically, trying to make each shot count as her ammunition dwindled. "Chief, they're getting smarter about using cover. I'm having trouble getting clean shots." Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see the enemy fighters had spread out and were using fire and movement tactics to advance up the slope. Every time Martinez engaged one group, another would move forward while she was focused elsewhere. "Wrench, status report," Rodriguez called softly into his radio. "In position, Chief. I've got charges placed along their primary avenue of approach, just waiting for them to get into the kill zone." Rodriguez watched the advancing fighters through his scope. They were about 300 meters away and moving carefully but steadily upward. In a few more minutes, they would be close enough to rush Martinez's position with automatic weapons and grenades. Chen stirred behind them, trying to speak. Rodriguez leaned down to hear what the wounded SEAL was saying. "Chief," Chen whispered weakly, "there's something you need to know about this mission. Save your strength. We'll talk when we get out of here." "No, listen. The target. Al-Masri. He was never here." This whole thing was a setup from the beginning. Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "What are you talking about?" "Before we left base, I intercepted some communications traffic. The intelligence about Al-Masri was fed to us deliberately. Someone wanted us to come here." Rodriguez stared at Chen in shock. If what he was saying was true, then this entire mission had been planned specifically to capture or kill his team. But who had the access and motivation to set up American Special Operations Forces? Who, Chen? Who set us up? But Chen had lost consciousness again, leaving Rodriguez with more questions than answers. If Chen was right, then this ambush was more than just bad luck or enemy skill. Someone with access to American intelligence had deliberately sent them into a trap. Martinez's rifle cracked again, bringing Rodriguez's attention back to the immediate threat. 250 meters, Chief. They're getting close to assault range. Wrench, get ready. Wait for my signal." Rodriguez could see the enemy fighters moving through the rocks below, getting closer to the area where Kowalski had placed his charges. The timing would have to be perfect. Too early, and they would miss most of the attackers. Too late, and the fighters would be close enough to overrun their position even after taking casualties. "Steady, Viper. Let them get a little closer." Martinez had switched to her sidearm to conserve her remaining rifle ammunition. The 9mm pistol was less effective at range, but she was still managing to keep the enemy fighters cautious about exposing themselves. "Chief, I can see more movement coming up the valley from the south," Martinez reported. "Looks like another 15 or 20 fighters. We're about to be seriously outnumbered." Rodriguez felt the walls closing in around them. Even if Kowalski's charges worked perfectly, they would still be facing overwhelming odds. And Chen needed medical attention that was still 10 minutes away at best. "Romeo 6, Alpha Team, urgent," Rodriguez called into his radio. "We are in heavy contact with approximately 40 enemy fighters. We have 1 Kia, 2 missing, and 1 urgent medical evacuation required. Request immediate air support and medical evacuation. Alpha Team, Romeo 6. Air support is 8 minutes out. Medical evacuation standing by but cannot approach your location under fire." 8 more minutes. Rodriguez wondered if they could hold out that long against 40 fighters with the limited ammunition they had left. 200 meters, Chief, Martinez reported. "It's now or never." Rodriguez could see the enemy fighters moving through the area where Kowalski had placed his charges. Most of them were in the target zone, but a few were still approaching from different angles. "Wrench, execute, execute, execute." The explosions erupted across the slope like a string of massive firecrackers, sending rocks and debris flying in all directions. The sound echoed off the mountains, and Rodriguez could see several of the advancing fighters disappear in clouds of dust and smoke. But even as the explosions died away, Rodriguez could see that some of the enemy fighters had survived and were already regrouping for another assault. The charges had disrupted their attack and caused casualties, but hadn't eliminated the threat. Viper, count off remaining targets. Martinez was scanning the slope through her rifle scope. I count at least 10 still moving down there, plus the reinforcements coming up from the south. We bought ourselves maybe 5 minutes. Rodriguez looked at Chen, still unconscious and losing blood. Then at Martinez preparing for another round of fighting, with almost no ammunition left. Somewhere down the mountain, Thompson and Ramirez were dead or captured, and Kowalski was working his way back to their position through hostile territory. The situation seemed hopeless, but Rodriguez had not survived 12 years in special operations by giving up when things looked bad. There had to be something they could do. Some way to turn the situation around. Then he heard something that made his heart race with both hope and fear. The distinctive sound of helicopter rotors echoing off the mountain walls, still distant but getting closer. Air support was finally arriving, but Rodriguez wondered if it would be too late to save what was left of his team. Number Navy SEALs story, Part 4 continued. The sound of rotor blades grew louder as Rodriguez tried to raise the incoming aircraft on his radio. The enemy fighters below had heard the helicopters too, and were frantically taking cover among the rocks, knowing that American air power would change the battlefield dynamics dramatically. Wildcat 6-1, this is Alpha Team, Rodriguez called urgently. We are troops in contact with approximately 30 enemy fighters on the north slope of Hill 2847. Friendly positions marked by infrared strobe. Danger close air support required immediately. Alpha Team, Wildcat 6-1. I have visual on your strobe. Be advised. I'm seeing significant enemy movement throughout your area. This is going to be a hot extraction. Rodriguez looked around their defensive position. Chen was still unconscious and bleeding. Martinez was down to her last few rounds of sniper ammunition, and Kowalski was somewhere on the mountainside trying to work his way back to them through enemy territory. Wildcat 6-1. We have 1 urgent surgical and 2 missing team members last seen approximately 400 meters southwest of our current position. Copy that, Alpha Team. I've got 2 Apache gunships inbound to clear the area. Then we'll bring in the medevac bird. As if summoned by his words, 2 AH-64 Apache helicopters appeared over the ridge, their 30mm chain guns already seeking targets on the slope below. The distinctive sound of the Apache's cannon began echoing across the valley as the gunships engaged the enemy fighters. Rodriguez watched through his binoculars as the concentrated firepower tore through the enemy positions. Rocks exploded under the impact of high explosive rounds, and he could see fighters scrambling for deeper cover or trying to withdraw down the slope. That's beautiful, Martinez said with satisfaction as she watched the Apaches work. I count at least 8 tangos down from the gun runs, but Rodriguez's attention was focused on something else he had spotted through his binoculars. In the area where Thompson and Ramirez had been overrun, he could see 2 figures being dragged by armed fighters toward a group of buildings in the valley below. Wildcat 6-1. I have eyes on 2 possible American prisoners being moved to the compound at grid reference. Rodriguez quickly calculated the coordinates and passed them to the Apache pilots. Roger that, Alpha Team. We see the movement. 2 individuals being escorted by approximately 6 armed fighters. Rules of engagement are weapons tight due to possible American personnel. Rodriguez felt frustrated. The presence of his captured team members meant the Apaches couldn't simply destroy the compound where they were being held. The enemy fighters had gained themselves human shields and a bargaining position. Kowalski's voice suddenly crackled through the radio. Chief, I'm about 200 meters south of your position, but I've got problems. There's a group of fighters between me and you, and I think they're planning to rush your position while the birds are focused on the compound. Rodriguez scanned the area south of their position and spotted muzzle flashes among the rocks. Kowalski was right. While the Apaches were engaging the main enemy force, a smaller group was trying to flank around and hit them from an unexpected direction. Viper, we've got company coming from the south. Martinez swung her rifle around and immediately spotted the threat. I see them. 8 fighters moving through the rocks about 300 meters out. They're trying to use the helicopter noise to mask their movement. Wildcat 6-1. We have additional enemy fighters moving to flank our position from the south. Can you engage? Negative, Alpha Team. We're focused on keeping the main force away from the compound where your people are being held. You'll have to handle the flanking force with organic weapons. Rodriguez checked his ammunition again. Still not enough for a sustained firefight, especially against 8 fresh fighters who weren't pinned down by helicopter gunfire. Wrench, can you work your way around behind those flanking fighters? Negative, Chief. I'd have to cross too much open ground, but I might be able to get close enough to use my remaining demo charges. Rodriguez considered the options quickly. Chen needed immediate medical evacuation. Martinez was almost out of ammunition, and 8 enemy fighters were moving to attack their position. Meanwhile, Thompson and Ramirez were being held prisoner in a compound that couldn't be directly attacked. Do it, Rodriguez decided. But be careful. We can't afford to lose anyone else. As Kowalski began moving toward the flanking fighters, Rodriguez turned his attention to the bigger problem. His 2 captured team members were being held in a compound surrounded by armed fighters, and the Apaches couldn't risk direct attack with Americans inside. Wildcat 6-1. What's the status on the medevac bird? Alpha Team. Medevac is standing by about 5 kilometers out, but the landing zone needs to be secure before they can approach. Rodriguez looked at Chen, whose breathing was becoming more labored. The young SEAL was running out of time, but the landing zone was still under threat from multiple directions. Martinez fired her last sniper round at one of the flanking fighters, then switched to her sidearm. That's it for the long gun, Chief. I'm down to pistol and whatever rifle ammo you can spare. The situation was spiraling toward disaster when Rodriguez heard something that changed everything. A new voice came through on his radio, speaking with a slight accent that he couldn't quite place. Alpha Team, this is Overwatch. I have been monitoring your situation. I can assist with your flanking problem. Rodriguez had never heard the call sign Overwatch before, and the voice didn't match any of the air support elements he knew were in the area. Overwatch Alpha Team. Identify yourself and your capabilities. Alpha Team, I am a civilian contractor, providing reconnaissance support in your area. I have a clear view of the 8 fighters moving to flank your position. Before Rodriguez could respond, he heard a rifle shot from somewhere on the opposite ridge, followed immediately by shouting from the area where the flanking fighters were positioned. Martinez was scanning the distant ridgeline through her rifle scope. Chief, I can see a muzzle flash from the ridge about 800 meters to our northwest. Somebody just dropped one of those flankers. Another shot echoed across the valley, and Rodriguez could see through his binoculars that another of the flanking fighters had gone down. The remaining 6 were scrambling for cover, clearly confused about where the shots were coming from. Overwatch. What is your position and status? Alpha Team, I am positioned on Hill 2851, approximately 800 meters northwest of your location. I have clear fields of fire on multiple enemy positions. Rodriguez quickly calculated the distance and angle. Whoever this Overwatch was, they were in an excellent position to provide supporting fire across the entire battlefield. But something about the situation didn't feel right. Overwatch, we did not request civilian contractor support, and we have no record of authorized personnel in this area. A third shot rang out, and another of the flanking fighters dropped. The remaining 5 were pinned down and unable to continue their advance toward Rodriguez's position. Alpha Team. I was conducting reconnaissance when I observed your situation. I could not stand by and watch American service members be overrun. Martinez was studying the distant ridge through her scope. Chief, I can just barely make out what looks like a sniper position, but I can't see details at this range. Rodriguez had to make a decision. Whoever Overwatch was, they were providing effective fire support at a critical moment, but accepting help from an unknown element went against every protocol he knew. The decision was made for him when Kowalski's voice came urgently through the radio. Chief, I'm in position to hit the flanking force with my demo charges, but there are only 5 left now. Somebody's been picking them off from long range. That's our mystery sniper, Rodriguez replied. Stand by while I try to coordinate this." As he spoke, Rodriguez heard the distinctive crack of another long-range rifle shot, followed by the sound of Kowalski's demo charges exploding among the rocks where the flanking fighters had taken cover. When the smoke cleared, the flanking threat had been eliminated. Wildcat 6-1. The flanking force has been neutralized. What's the status on the compound? Alpha Team. We've been observing the compound, and the situation there has changed. The fighters holding your personnel have withdrawn into the main building. We can't get clear shots without risking the hostages. Rodriguez felt the situation slipping away again. They had eliminated the immediate threats to their position, but Thompson and Ramirez were still being held prisoner, and Chen was running out of time. Overwatch, can you provide fire support on the compound where our personnel are being held? Alpha Team, negative. The angle from my position does not provide clear shots into the target building without risking your people. Rodriguez was trying to figure out their next move when Martinez grabbed his arm urgently. Chief, look at the compound through your binos. Something's happening. Rodriguez focused his binoculars on the main building where his team members were being held. He could see armed figures moving around the structure, but they seemed agitated about something. Then he saw smoke beginning to rise from one of the smaller buildings nearby. Wildcat 6-1. I'm seeing smoke from the compound area. Are you engaging anything down there? Negative, Alpha Team. We're holding position as ordered. That smoke is not from our weapons. Rodriguez watched in confusion as more smoke began rising from different parts of the compound. The enemy fighters were running between buildings, clearly responding to some kind of threat, but he couldn't see what was causing the chaos. Then, through his binoculars, Rodriguez saw something that made him blink and look again. A figure in dark clothing was moving through the compound, appearing and disappearing among the buildings like a ghost. The figure was too far away to identify clearly, but they were obviously engaging the enemy fighters with close-quarters weapons. Who the hell is that? Martinez asked. Watching the same scene through her rifle scope, Rodriguez keyed his radio. Overwatch. Do you have any personnel on the ground in the compound area? The response came back immediately. Alpha Team. Negative. I am alone, in an Overwatch position. But as Rodriguez continued to watch through his binoculars, he saw the mysterious figure in the compound take down 2 more enemy fighters before disappearing into the smoke. Whoever it was, they were systematically eliminating the guards holding Thompson and Ramirez. The battlefield was changing rapidly, but Rodriguez still didn't understand who was helping them or why. All he knew was that his captured team members might have a chance at rescue if he could figure out how to coordinate with these unknown allies. Chen stirred behind them, consciousness returning briefly. Chief, he whispered weakly. The person helping us. I think I know who it is. But before Chen could explain further, he lost consciousness again, leaving Rodriguez with even more questions and a rapidly evolving tactical situation that seemed to be spiraling beyond his understanding or control. Rodriguez watched through his binoculars as chaos continued to unfold in the compound below. The mysterious figure in dark clothing had eliminated at least 6 enemy fighters and seemed to be methodically working through the buildings where Thompson and Ramirez were being held. Smoke and dust obscured much of the action, but Rodriguez could see muzzle flashes from inside the compound as the unknown operator engaged the remaining guards. Wildcat 6-1. I need you to hold position and be ready to provide close air support if requested, but do not engage the compound until I give you clearance. We may have friendly forces on the ground down there. Copy that, Alpha Team. We'll maintain Overwatch and wait for your command. Kowalski had worked his way back to their position on the ridge, breathing hard from his climb and carrying several enemy weapons he had recovered. Chief, I counted at least 12 tangos down from the demo charges and that sniper support, but I also saw something weird down there. What do you mean weird? There was a body near where I placed the charges. Female, looked like she might be local, but she had professional gear. Radio, body armor, the works. Looked like she'd been there for a while. Rodriguez felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind, but the picture wasn't clear yet. A female with professional equipment who had been in the area for some time. An unknown sniper, providing support from impossible ranges. and someone with advanced close-quarters combat skills operating in the compound. Overwatch. What is your real identity and mission in this area? There was a long pause before the response came back. And when it did, the voice sounded different. Less formal. More personal. Alpha Team. My name is Captain Sarah Chen. U.S. Army Special Forces. I've been conducting a solo reconnaissance mission in this area for the past 6 days. Rodriguez felt his world shift. Chen? As in related to our tornado? Jake Chen is my younger brother, Chief Rodriguez. When I heard your call sign and team members on the radio, I knew I had to intervene. Martinez looked at Rodriguez with surprise. Chen never mentioned having a sister in Special Forces, because she's not supposed to exist, Rodriguez realized. Overwatch. Are you operating under official orders? Another pause. Negative, Alpha Team. I was conducting an unauthorized mission to gather intelligence on the network that has been targeting American Special Operations teams. The ambush you walked into was specifically designed to capture Navy SEALs. Rodriguez felt the final pieces falling into place. Chen's earlier words about the mission being a setup. The sophisticated tactics of the enemy fighters. The fact that their target had never been in the location they were sent to. Someone had been feeding intelligence to enemy forces, and Sarah Chen had been investigating it on her own. Overwatch. What's your status in the compound? I have eliminated 8 hostile fighters and located your 2 team members. They are injured, but alive. However, there are still approximately 15 enemy fighters in the main building. And they're preparing to execute your people unless you withdraw. Rodriguez could see armed figures moving on the roof of the main building, setting up what looked like a heavy machine gun position. The enemy fighters were preparing for a final stand, using Thompson and Ramirez as human shields. Chief, Martinez said urgently, I can see movement on the roof. They're setting up crew-served weapons. Wildcat 6-1, we need immediate suppression of enemy positions on the roof of the main building, but watch for friendly forces in the compound. Alpha Team, we can engage the roof positions, but if they have your people inside that building, there's not much we can do. Rodriguez was weighing their options when Sarah Chen's voice came back on the radio with new information. Alpha Team, I've found something down here you need to know about. There's an American officer among the enemy fighters, and he's been coordinating the ambushes against special operations teams. Identify. Major David Patterson, assigned to intelligence section at Bagram. I've seen him twice now giving orders to the local fighters. Rodriguez felt sick. An American officer betraying special operations teams to enemy forces explained how the ambushes had been so well planned and coordinated. It also explained how their mission intelligence had been compromised. Do you have proof? I've been photographing and recording everything I could for the past week. Patterson has been meeting with enemy commanders and providing them with mission details, troop movements, everything they needed to set up these ambushes. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Rodriguez wondered how many other American teams had been compromised. How many good soldiers had died because of Patterson's treachery. Overwatch. What's your current position relative to our people? I'm in the building adjacent to where they're being held. I can see them through a window, but there are at least 6 guards with them. Patterson is trying to negotiate some kind of prisoner exchange. Rodriguez could hear voices shouting in English from the compound below, although he couldn't make out the words at his distance. The enemy fighters were apparently trying to negotiate, probably demanding safe passage in exchange for the lives of the captured SEALs. Chief, Chen stirred again behind them, consciousness returning briefly. Sarah. She's been hunting the leak for months. Went off the books. When command wouldn't listen, Rodriguez leaned down to hear his wounded teammate better. Jake, stay with me. Help is almost here. The mission. Patterson set us up. Sarah has the evidence, but she couldn't get anyone to believe her. Chen lost consciousness again, but his words confirmed what his sister had been telling them. The betrayal went deep, and Sarah Chen had been conducting a solo investigation when official channels failed. Overwatch, I need you to maintain position and gather as much evidence as possible. We're going to need proof of Patterson's involvement when this is over. Copy that, Chief. But first we need to get your people out of there. I have a plan, but it's going to require precise timing. Rodriguez listened as Sarah Chen outlined her proposal. It was risky and required coordination between ground forces, air support, and her position in the compound. But it was their best chance to rescue Thompson and Ramirez while gathering the evidence needed to expose Patterson's betrayal. Wildcat 6-1, stand by for immediate close air support on my command. We're going to attempt a rescue operation. Alpha Team, we're ready when you are. Rodriguez checked his equipment one final time. They had enough ammunition for one final assault, and the helicopter gunships were in position to provide support. Sarah Chen was positioned in the compound to create the distraction they would need. Wrench, Martinez, we're going down there to get our people back. Chen stays here for immediate medevac when this is over. As they prepared to move, Rodriguez heard Sarah Chen's voice on the radio one more time. Alpha Team, I want you to know that Jake has talked about you and this team constantly. He considers you family, and so do I. Let's bring everyone home. Rodriguez felt the weight of responsibility and brotherhood that bound special operations teams together. They had started this mission as 6 SEALs hunting a terrorist. They were ending it as a family fighting to save their own. All stations, this is Alpha Team. Execute rescue operation in 3, 2, 1, mark. The final assault began as helicopter gunships opened fire on the compound's outer buildings, while Sarah Chen began her assault on the main structure from the inside. Rodriguez, Martinez, and Kowalski moved down the slope at a run, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether they all went home together or whether some of them didn't go home at all. As they reached the compound walls, Rodriguez could hear the distinctive sound of close-quarters combat from inside the main building. Sarah Chen was keeping her promise to bring everyone home, and Rodriguez was determined to do the same for his team. The battle for the compound was brief but intense. When the smoke finally cleared, Thompson and Ramirez were free. Patterson was in custody with enough evidence to convict him of treason, and the Chen siblings were finally reunited after months of separation. Chen would spend 3 weeks in military hospitals recovering from his wounds, but he would make a full recovery. Thompson's leg wound healed completely, and Ramirez received a commendation for his medical care under fire. Sarah Chen was quietly reassigned to a new unit after her unauthorized investigation was vindicated by the evidence she had gathered. Patterson was court-martialed and sentenced to life in prison for treason. Rodriguez returned to his team with a deeper understanding of how far soldiers would go to protect their brothers and sisters in arms. The mission had started with betrayal and ambush, but it had ended with the kind of courage and sacrifice that made the special operations community a true brotherhood. Standing on the deck of the base hospital 3 weeks later, watching Jake Chen take his first steps since his injury, Rodriguez reflected on how a routine mission had become something much more significant. They had not only survived an impossible situation but had exposed a betrayal that could have cost many more American lives. Martinez joined him on the deck, also watching Chen's recovery. Think we'll ever see Sarah again? I doubt it, Rodriguez replied. People like her operate in the shadows, but I have a feeling she'll be out there somewhere, watching over soldiers like us. As the sun set over the mountains of Afghanistan, Rodriguez knew that his team had been part of something larger than a single mission. They had been part of a family that would never abandon each other, no matter how impossible the odds or how dangerous the mission. The Brotherhood of Special Operations was built on trust, courage, and the absolute commitment that no one gets left behind. On this mission, they had proven that commitment extended far beyond official orders and unit assignments. Sometimes the family that fights together is bound by something stronger than blood, stronger even than death. Rodriguez smiled as he watched Chen laugh with his teammates, knowing that they had all come home together, just as Sarah Chen had promised they would.